The stagecoach rattled into Sloan, Nevada, just as the sun began its descent toward the jagged peaks of the Spring Mountains. And Theresa Holloway pressed her bruised face against the dusty window, praying that this God-forsaken stretch of desert would be far enough from Chicago to keep her alive. Her ribs ached with every bounce of the wooden wheels against the rutted road, reminders of Marcus's last rage 3 weeks ago, when she had finally found the courage to steal away in the night with nothing but the clothes on her back and the small leather pouch of coins she had been hiding for 2 years. The other passengers had given her curious looks when she boarded in Carson City, but she kept her head down and her story to herself, because explaining how a respectable banker's wife ended up fleeing across the country with a black eye and cracked ribs was not a conversation she intended to have with strangers. The driver called out that they were approaching the station, and Theresa gathered her single carpet bag, wincing as she stood. Through the window, she could see Sloan was barely more than a collection of weathered buildings clustered around a main street, with the railroad depot at one end and what looked like a saloon at the other. It was April of 1882, and this place looked like it had been forgotten by time and progress both. Perfect. She stepped down from the coach onto the packed dirt, squinting against the late afternoon glare. The air was dry and hot, so different from the humid springs of Chicago that it felt like stepping into another world entirely. That was what she wanted. Another world, another life, anything but the one she had left behind. Need help finding somewhere, miss? The station agent was an older man with kind eyes and a weathered face that spoke of decades under the Nevada sun. "I need a place to stay," Theresa said, her voice hoarse from days of travel. "And work, if there is any to be had." The man scratched his chin thoughtfully. "Well, there is the boarding house run by Mrs. Patterson. As for work, you might try the general store or the restaurant. We do not get many single ladies through here looking to stay, I will tell you that honestly." Theresa nodded her thanks and took the directions he offered. The boarding house was a 2-story structure that had once been painted white, but had faded to a dingy gray. Mrs. Patterson turned out to be a stout woman in her 50s with sharp eyes that took in every detail of Theresa's appearance, from her fine but travel-stained dress to the fading bruises she had tried to cover with powder. "I do not ask questions about people's pasts, Mrs. Patterson said after a long moment of appraisal, "but I do not tolerate trouble in my establishment. You running from the law? No, madam, just from a bad situation." Mrs. Patterson nodded as if that was answer enough. "Room is $2 a week, paid in advance, breakfast included. You look like you could use a hot meal and a proper bed." Theresa paid for 2 weeks, watching her precious funds diminish, and accepted the key to a small room on the 2nd floor. It was sparse but clean, with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a window that looked out over the main street. She sat on the edge of the bed and allowed herself, for the first time in weeks, to cry. The next morning, she ventured out to look for work. The general store had no positions available, and the restaurant owner took one look at her fine features and educated manner of speech and said he needed someone who could handle rough cowboy talk and rougher behavior, implying she was too delicate for the job. Theresa wanted to laugh at the irony. She had survived 3 years of Marcus's brutality. She could handle cowboys. By noon, she was discouraged and exhausted, her ribs throbbing. She was walking past the saloon when a woman's voice called out from the doorway. "You are the new girl staying at Patterson's, are you not?" Theresa turned to see a woman in her early 30s with auburn hair and a red dress that marked her profession clearly. But her face was friendly, and Theresa was in no position to be particular about who showed her kindness. "I am Theresa Holloway, Ruby Morrison." I heard you were looking for work. The Broken Spoke Ranch is hiring for their summer cattle drive preparation. They need someone to help with cooking and general camp work. The pay is decent, and old Josiah Kendrick, who runs the place, is fair, which is more than you can say for most ranchers around here. I do not know anything about ranch work, Theresa admitted. Can you cook? Can you follow instructions? Can you work hard without complaining? Yes to all three. Then you know enough. The ranch is about 5 miles north of town. Tell them Ruby sent you and mention you are looking for the seasonal work. They have been trying to fill the position for weeks. Theresa thanked her and decided she had nothing to lose. She spent some of her dwindling funds on renting a horse from the livery, and the stable hand gave her directions to the Broken Spoke Ranch. The ride north took her through increasingly beautiful country. The desert floor was dotted with Joshua trees and sagebrush, and the mountains rose in the distance like purple sentinels. The vastness of it all made her feel small and anonymous in a way that was comforting. In Chicago, Marcus had eyes everywhere, friends in every level of society and business. Here she was nobody, and nobody was exactly what she wanted to be. The Broken Spoke Ranch announced itself with a weathered wooden arch over the road. She followed the path to a cluster of buildings. A main house, a large barn, several corrals, and various outbuildings. Cowboys moved about their work, and the air smelled of horses, hay, and dust. A man emerged from the barn as she rode up. He was young, perhaps 25 or 26, tall and lean with the sun-bronzed skin of someone who lived his life outdoors. He wore a dusty brown hat pushed back on dark hair, and his eyes were in startling shade of blue-green that reminded her of the ocean, though she imagined he had never seen the sea. Those eyes appraised her with curiosity, but no judgment as she dismounted, trying not to wince at the pain in her ribs. "Help you, madam?" His voice was low and pleasant, with the slow drawl of someone who did not feel the need to rush his words. "I am looking for work. I heard you might need someone for cooking and camp work for the cattle drive preparation." "You heard right. I am Yates Kendrick. My father, Josiah, owns the ranch, but I run the day-to-day operations and the cattle business. You have experience with this kind of work." Theresa decided honesty was the best approach. "No, but I am a good cook. I am not afraid of hard work, and I need a job badly enough that I will do whatever is required to earn my keep." Yates studied her for a long moment, and she had the unsettling feeling that he could see more than she wanted to reveal. "You are running from something," he said, not unkindly. "Yes," she said simply. "Is it going to show up on my ranch and cause problems?" "I sincerely hope not. I have come a long way to make sure of that." He nodded slowly. "Fair enough. The work is hard and the hours are long. We start before dawn and finish after dusk most days. You would be cooking for a crew of 10 to 12 men, managing supplies, and helping with whatever else needs doing around camp. Pay is $30 a month plus room and board. You would bunk in the back room of the cookhouse." "Are you interested?" $30 a month was more than she had dared hope for. Very interested. "Can you start tomorrow?" "I can start today." The corner of his mouth lifted in what might have been the ghost of a smile. "Tomorrow is fine. Be here by 5 in the morning. I will introduce you to the crew and show you the cookhouse setup." Theresa rode back to town feeling lighter than she had in months. She returned the rented horse, paid Mrs. Patterson for one more night, and packed her meager belongings. That evening, she counted her remaining money and calculated that if she was careful, she would be fine until her first month's pay came through. Sleep did not come easily that night. She kept startling awake, half convinced that Marcus would somehow find her, that she would hear his heavy footsteps on the stairs and his angry voice demanding she come home. but the only sounds were the distant piano from the saloon and the occasional bark of a dog. And gradually, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she had truly escaped. She arrived at the Broken Spoke Ranch just before 5 the next morning, riding a gentle mare she had purchased cheaply from the livery owner who was looking to sell off his older stock. The ranch was already alive with activity. Men moved through the pre-dawn darkness with lanterns, tending to horses and preparing for the day's work. Yates met her at the cookhouse, a long, low building with a large kitchen area and a smaller back room that would serve as her quarters. The room was basic but adequate, with a real bed, a chest of drawers, and even a small mirror on the wall. "Coffee is already on," Yates said, gesturing to the large pot on the massive iron stove that dominated the kitchen. "The men expect breakfast by 6. There is bacon, eggs, biscuits, and gravy as the standard morning fare. I will introduce you to everyone, and then I will leave you to it." The crew assembled in the cookhouse dining area as the sun began to paint the eastern sky in shades of pink and gold. They were a varied group, ranging in age from late teens to grizzled men in their 50s. Yates introduced her simply as Theresa, their new camp cook, and the men nodded their greetings with varying degrees of interest and skepticism. "Any man who gives Miss Holloway a hard time will answer to me," Yates said, his tone easy but with an undercurrent of steel. "She is here to do a job, same as all of you. Treat her with respect." The first few days were a blur of exhaustion. Theresa woke before dawn to start coffee and prepare breakfast, cleaned up from that meal only to start preparing the midday dinner, and then began the evening supper preparations. In between, there were supplies to organize, bread to bake, and 1,000 small tasks that kept her moving from sunrise well past sunset. Her ribs protested every movement, but she gritted her teeth and pushed through the pain. She could not afford to fail at this job. The men were rough and spoke crudely, but they were not unkind. They appreciated good food, and Theresa quickly learned what they liked and how much they could eat, which was considerably more than she had anticipated. She had always been a good cook, having learned from her mother before her marriage, and she found satisfaction in feeding these hard-working men and seeing their appreciation. Yates checked in on her regularly those first days, making sure she had everything she needed and that none of the crew was causing problems. He was quiet and watchful, the kind of man who seemed to notice everything but spoke only when necessary. Theresa found his presence oddly comforting, though she was careful to maintain a professional distance. She was in no position to trust any man, no matter how kind he seemed. It was during the second week that things shifted. She was preparing supper, rolling out dough for biscuits, when she reached up to grab a pot from a high shelf. The movement pulled at her ribs wrong and she gasped, clutching at her side as pain shot through her torso. The pot clattered to the floor. "Let me get that." Yates's voice came from the doorway and she had not heard him enter. He crossed the kitchen in a few long strides and picked up the pot, then turned to look at her with concern. "You are hurt." "I am fine, just a little sore." "Theresa." He said her name gently but firmly. "I have seen enough injuries in my time to know when someone is working through serious pain." "How bad is it?" She wanted to lie, to brush it off, but there was something in his eyes that made her want to tell the truth. "Cracked ribs. A few weeks old. They are healing." "How did it happen?" "I would rather not say." Yates was quiet for a moment and then he nodded. "All right, but you need to let me know if the work is too much. I do not want you making the injury worse. I need this job, and you will keep it, but not if you damage yourself permanently in the process. Let me help with the heavy lifting from now on." No arguments. It was not a request, and Theresa found she did not want to argue anyway. Over the following weeks, Yates made a point of stopping by the cookhouse multiple times a day, ostensibly to check on supplies or discuss meals, but always managing to help with the heavy pots or the lifting that strained her ribs. The men noticed but said nothing, and Theresa began to suspect that Yates's reputation as a fair but firm boss kept any gossip at bay. As April turned to May, Theresa grew stronger and more confident in her role. Her ribs healed, and with them, some of the constant fear she had carried since leaving Chicago. She woke each morning not with dread but with purpose. The work was hard, but it was honest work, and she was earning her own way for the first time in her adult life. That meant more than she could ever have articulated. She also began to notice things about Yates Kendrick that had nothing to do with his role as her employer. The way he treated his horses with patient kindness. How he was always the first to tackle the hardest jobs and never asked his men to do anything he would not do himself. The rare smile that transformed his normally serious face into something warm and approachable. The way his hands moved with confident grace, whether he was handling a rope or a horse or fixing a broken fence rail. She told herself firmly that noticing these things was natural and meant nothing. She was in no position to develop feelings for anyone, let alone her employer. She had escaped one man's control and had no intention of putting herself in a position to be controlled again. But still, she noticed, one evening in mid-May, after the crew had finished supper and dispersed to their various tasks or leisure, Yates lingered in the cookhouse as Theresa cleaned up. He poured himself a cup of coffee and leaned against the counter, watching her work. "You have done a good job here," he said. "The men are happy with the food and everything runs smoothly. I wanted you to know that. Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity you gave me." "Can I ask you something?" Theresa tensed slightly but nodded. "What made you come all the way to Nevada? You are clearly educated and from back east, judging by your speech. This is a long way to come just for ranch work." She was silent for a long moment, scrubbing at a pot that was already clean. Then, slowly, she said, "I was married to a man in Chicago, a banker, very respectable, very successful. Everyone thought I was fortunate to have caught his attention. But you were not fortunate. No, he was cruel. Controlling, violent when things did not go his way." The words came easier than she expected, perhaps because she did not have to look at Yates while she said them. "I stayed as long as I thought I had to, which was too long. Finally, I realized that if I did not leave, he was going to kill me eventually, so I took what little I could and ran as far as I could afford to go. He does not know where you are. I do not think so. I used a different name when I bought my stagecoach tickets, and I have been careful. But I wake up most nights afraid he has somehow found me." She heard Yates set down his coffee cup, and then he moved closer, not touching her but close enough that she could feel his presence as a solid, reassuring thing. "You are safe here," he said quietly. "I give you my word. If anyone comes looking for you, they will have to go through me and every man on this ranch. We protect our own." Theresa finally turned to look at him, and the sincerity in his eyes made her throat tighten. "Why would you do that for me? You barely know me." "I know enough. I know you are brave enough to cross a continent alone to escape a bad situation. I know you work harder than most men I have hired. I know you deserve better than what you had." He paused, seeming to consider his next words carefully. "And I know that I would count it a privilege to stand between you and anyone who wants to hurt you." Something shifted in that moment, some wall inside Theresa that she had built so carefully beginning to develop its first crack. She searched his face for any sign of the possessive intensity that Marcus had called love, but found only steady, honest regard. "Thank you," she whispered. Yates nodded and stepped back, giving her space again. Get some rest. Tomorrow is going to be a long day. We are moving the herd to the northern pasture. After he left, Theresa stood in the quiet cookhouse, her hands still in the dishwater, and tried to understand what she was feeling. It was not fear, which was itself remarkable. It was something warmer, something that felt dangerously like hope. The next weeks passed in a rhythm of work and gradual healing, both physical and emotional. The cattle drive preparations intensified as June approached. The crew worked longer hours, and Theresa adjusted her schedule to ensure they always had hot food and strong coffee ready when needed. She found herself looking forward to Yates's visits to the cookhouse, their conversations growing longer and more personal. He told her about growing up on the ranch, about his mother who had died when he was 15, about taking on more responsibility as his father aged and his arthritis worsened. She found herself telling him about her childhood in Boston, about her parents who had died in a fire when she was 20, about how she had met Marcus at a time when she was grieving and vulnerable, and he had seemed like stability and safety. He was not always terrible, she said one evening as they sat on the cookhouse porch watching the sun set over the mountains. Or maybe he was, and I just did not see it until after we were married. He was charming when he wanted to be, but once I was his wife, it was like a mask came off. He needed to control everything. What I wore, who I spoke to, how I spent every minute of my day, and when I did not comply perfectly, he got angry. How long were you married? 3 years. 3 years too long. Yates was quiet, and then he said, My mother used to say that the measure of a person is not in how they treat those who can benefit them, but how they treat those who are completely in their power. By that measure, your husband was no man at all. Do you think I should have left sooner? I think survival sometimes means staying until you can find a way out. I do not judge you for the time it took. His words settled something in her that she had not realized was still unsettled. She had spent so much time berating herself for not leaving earlier, for not seeing the signs before marriage, for somehow allowing herself to end up in that situation. But Yates did not see her as weak or foolish. He saw her as a survivor, and that perspective shifted something fundamental in how she saw herself. In late June, old Josiah Kendrick came down with a fierce fever. The ranch doctor was called, and Yates spent several anxious days attending to his father while trying to keep the ranch running. Theresa took over some of the management coordination, bringing him meals and making sure he ate, organizing information from the various work crews so he did not have to run himself ragged trying to be everywhere at once. You do not have to do this, Yates said one night when she brought him supper in his father's sick room. This is not part of your job. I know, I want to help. He looked at her for a long moment, and she saw exhaustion and worry etched in his face, but also something warmer, something that made her pulse quicken. I do not know what I did to deserve you walking into my ranch that day, but I am grateful for it every single day. Josiah recovered slowly, and by early July he was weak but on the mend. The crisis had brought Theresa and Yates even closer, and the crew had begun to notice the way their boss looked at the camp cook, the way she seemed to relax in his presence in a way she did not with anyone else. One of the older cowboys, a man named Samuel who had been with the Broken Spoke for over 20 years, pulled Theresa aside one morning after breakfast. I do not mean to speak out of turn, he said, his weathered face kind. But Yates is a good man, best I have ever worked for. He looks at you like you are the sunrise after a long night, and I have seen you look at him the same way when you think no one is watching. Theresa felt her face heat. I do not know what you mean. Yes, you do. And what I am saying is, if you have reservations because of whatever you ran from, I understand that. But do not let fear keep you from something that could be good. Life is too short and happiness too rare. She thought about Samuel's words for days. She could no longer deny, even to herself, that she had feelings for Yates. But admitting it and acting on it were two different things. She had sworn to herself that she would never again put herself in a position to be dependent on a man, and here she was working for Yates, living on his property, earning wages that he paid. How was that any different from her situation with Marcus? Except it was different. She knew that. Yates did not control her. He did not demand she account for her time or dictate her choices. He paid her fairly for work fairly done, and if she wanted to leave tomorrow, she knew he would let her go without rancor, probably even help her find another position. That was nothing like Marcus. But still, the fear lingered. What if she was wrong? What if Yates's kindness was just another mask? What if she opened her heart again and found herself right back in the same nightmare? The question was answered for her on a scorching day in mid-July. Theresa was in the cookhouse preparing the evening meal when she heard horses approaching at speed. She went to the door and saw a stranger on a dark gelding, well dressed in city clothes, his face hard and determined. Her blood went cold. Even at a distance, even though she had never seen him before, she knew. Marcus had sent someone to find her. Yates was working in the near corral, and he looked up as the stranger rode into the ranch yard. Theresa wanted to run to hide, but her legs would not move. She stood frozen in the cookhouse doorway as Yates walked over to meet the newcomer. "Help you with something?" Yates's voice was polite but cool. "I am looking for someone. A woman. Dark hair about this tall, refined manner. She might be going by the name Theresa Holloway. Her real name is Theresa Garrett, and she is wanted back in Chicago. Her husband hired me to find her and bring her home." "What is your business with her?" "That is between me, her, and her husband." "Well, I have not seen anyone matching that description. You might try the town. There is a boarding house there." The stranger's eyes narrowed. "I was told she might be working at a ranch in this area. This is the Broken Spoke, is it not?" "It is. And I am telling you we have no one here by that name or description." Theresa saw Yates shift his stance subtly, and she realized several of the ranch hands had stopped their work and were drifting closer. Samuel was among them, his hand resting casually on the revolver at his hip. "I think you are lying," the stranger said flatly. "I think she is here and you are hiding her. Think what you like. Now I am going to have to ask you to leave. This is private property." "Her husband is a powerful man. If you are harboring his wife, there will be consequences." Yates's expression did not change, but his voice dropped to a tone that was somehow more menacing for its quietness. "Let me tell you something about consequences. You ride onto my land, make accusations, and threaten me. Those are the kind of things that have consequences in Nevada. Now you have been asked politely to leave. The next request will be less polite." The stranger looked at Yates, then at the assembled ranch hands, calculating odds he clearly did not like. "This is not over." "Yes, it is. If you or anyone else comes back here looking for this woman, you will not be greeted kindly. Tell her husband she is not here, and even if she was, she is under my protection now. He needs to accept that she is gone and move on with his life." The stranger turned his horse and rode off at a gallop, dust rising in his wake. Yates waited until he was out of sight, then turned and walked straight to the cookhouse. Theresa was shaking, her hands gripping the doorframe for support. "Are you all right?" Yates asked, his voice gentle now. "He found me. Marcus found me. No. Someone he hired found a rumor of you. That is not the same as finding you, and he is not getting near you. You do not understand. Marcus will not stop. He sees me as his property, and he does not let go of what is his. He will send more people. He might come himself. I have to leave. I have to go somewhere else before he brings trouble down on you and your ranch." "Theresa, look at me." Yates waited until she met his eyes. "You are not going anywhere unless you want to. I meant what I told that man. You are under my protection. This ranch is your home as long as you want it to be." "Why? Why would you risk trouble with a powerful man from Chicago for me?" "Because you matter to me," he said simply. "Because the thought of you running again, always looking over your shoulder, never feeling safe, makes me angry in a way I cannot even properly express. Because I have fallen in love with you, and I will be damned if I let some bully from back east drag you back to a life that nearly destroyed you." Theresa stared at him, her heart hammering. "You love me." "Yes. I probably have for weeks now, but I did not want to say anything and scare you off. You have been through hell and you needed time and space to heal. But I am not going to stand here and pretend I feel nothing while you talk about running away again." Tears spilled down her cheeks, and she was not even sure why she was crying. Relief, fear, joy, too many emotions to name. "I love you too. I have been so afraid to admit it, even to myself. I do not know how to trust this, how to trust my own judgment after everything that happened." Yates reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and when she did not, he cupped her face gently in his hands. "I cannot change what happened to you. I cannot make those fears disappear overnight. But I can promise you this. I will spend every day proving to you that love is not supposed to hurt. That being with someone should make you feel more yourself, not less. That you deserve kindness and respect and tenderness. Let me prove it to you, Theresa. Let me love you the way you should have been loved all along." She closed her eyes, leaning into his touch, and nodded. "Yes, yes, I want that." He kissed her then, soft and careful, like she was something precious that might break. It was so different from the demanding, possessive kisses Marcus had claimed that it took her breath away. This was a question, not a command. A gift, not a taking. When they finally pulled apart, she was crying in earnest, but they were good tears this time. "We should talk to the sheriff," Yates said. "Let him know what is happening. Nevada may be a long way from Chicago, but we can still make sure there is a record of your situation in case that man or others come back." They rode into Sloan that evening, and Sheriff Dale McKenna listened to Theresa's story with a grave expression. He was an older man, seasoned and practical, and he did not waste time with judgment or unnecessary questions. "I will send word to the regional marshal, and we will keep an eye out for any strangers asking questions," he said. "If anyone shows up and tries to take you by force, that is kidnapping, and it will be treated as such. Your husband's reach may be long, Miss Holloway, but it does not extend to overriding Nevada law." "My name is Garrett," Theresa said. "Legally, I am still his wife." "Legally is not the same as practically," the sheriff said. "You left him, and you have a right to stay gone. If he wants to contest that, he can file for divorce in a court of law. He cannot just send hired men to drag you back like you are a stray dog." The sheriff's matter-of-fact support was comforting, and when they left his office, Theresa felt marginally safer. Yates kept her hand clasped in his as they walked to the restaurant for supper, a public declaration that they were together, and she found she did not mind who saw. Over the next several weeks, no one else came looking for her. Either the man had given up, or he had reported back to Marcus, and they were regrouping. Either way, Theresa tried to set aside her fear and focus on the present. Yates courted her properly, taking her on rides through the desert in the early mornings before the heat became oppressive, bringing her wildflowers he found on the range, spending evenings on the cookhouse porch talking about everything and nothing. The crew was openly pleased about the development. They had come to respect Theresa for her hard work and her no-nonsense approach to managing the cookhouse, and they liked Yates as a boss and a man. Seeing them happy together seemed to lift everyone's spirits. "About time," Samuel said to Theresa one morning as she served breakfast. "You two have been dancing around each other for months." "Has it been that obvious?" "Only to anyone with eyes," he said with a chuckle. By August, the main cattle drive was underway, and Theresa accompanied the crew as the camp cook, managing meals for 12 men in constantly changing locations as they moved the herd to new grazing land. It was grueling work, but she thrived on it. The vast open spaces of Nevada, the sharp-edged beauty of the desert, the camaraderie of the crew, all of it made her feel more alive than she had ever felt in Chicago's polished drawing rooms. Yates was in his element on the drive, managing the herd with skill and confidence. She loved watching him work, the easy way he sat a horse, the calm authority with which he directed the men. And at night, after the crew had settled down, he would come sit by her fire, and they would talk quietly while the stars wheeled overhead in impossible profusion. "I never imagined my life could be like this," she told him one night in late August. They were camped near a spring, the air finally cooling after the fierce heat of the day. "I never imagined I could feel this free, this happy." "You deserve all of it," Yates said. "I look at you and I see someone who has claimed her own life back through sheer courage and will. That is remarkable, Theresa. I could not have done it without you, without this place, this chance you gave me. You did the hard part. You left. You traveled across the country alone with no guarantee of what you would find. That was all you." She leaned against him and his arm came around her shoulders, solid and warm. "What happens when the drive is over, when we go back to the ranch? What do you want to happen?" "I want to stay. I want to keep working, keep building this life I have found. But I also want to be with you properly. I just do not know how that works when I am still legally married to Marcus." "Nevada has liberal divorce laws," Yates said carefully. "If your husband abandoned you or was cruel, you can file for divorce here. It takes time, but it is possible. What if he contests it? What if he comes here? Then we will deal with it. Together. Theresa, I am not going to push you into anything, but I want you to know my intentions. When you are free of him legally, I want to marry you. I want to build a life with you. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep beside you every night. I want to have children with you if you want that, and grow old on this ranch watching sunsets just like this one. But I will wait as long as it takes for you to be ready." Theresa felt tears prick her eyes again. It seemed she cried more now than she ever had in Chicago, but these tears were cleansers, washing away the old pain and making room for new joy. "I want all of that too. I want it so much it terrifies me. Then we will take it one day at a time. We will get you legally free of him and we will build our future step by step. There is no rush. We have time." When they returned to the ranch in September, Theresa contacted a lawyer in Carson City who specialized in divorce cases. The lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman named Margaret Foster, listened to Theresa's story and nodded firmly. "You have grounds for divorce based on cruelty and abandonment, given that he has made no effort to support you and you have evidence of abuse. I will draw up the papers. Nevada requires you to be a resident for 6 months before filing, but you have been here since April, so you qualify. The main issue will be serving him notice and dealing with any response he makes." The legal papers were filed in October. Theresa's hands shook as she signed them, knowing that this was both an ending and a beginning. The notice had to be served to Marcus in Chicago, and then there would be a waiting period while he had a chance to respond. For weeks, she lived in a state of anxious anticipation, waiting for the explosion she was sure would come. Marcus would fight this. He would come to Nevada personally, or send lawyers, or somehow find a way to drag her back into his control. She slept poorly, jumping at every unexpected sound. But as October became November and the desert air turned cool, there was no response. The lawyer informed her that Marcus had been successfully served and had not filed any contest to the divorce. He was letting her go. "I do not understand," Theresa said when Margaret Foster gave her the news. "This does not sound like Marcus at all. He does not just give up." "Sometimes men like him move on when they realize they have lost control," Margaret said. "He knows where you are now, knows you have protection and legal representation. Perhaps he has decided it is not worth the fight, or perhaps he has simply found someone else to control." That last thought made Theresa sick, thinking of some other woman falling into Marcus's trap. But she could not save the world. She could only save herself. The divorce was finalized in late November, and on a crisp December morning, Theresa woke up legally free for the first time in 3.5 years. She sat on the edge of her bed in the cookhouse, holding the final decree in her hands, and cried with relief so profound, it felt like a physical weight lifting from her chest. Yates found her there an hour later, tears still wet on her face but smiling. He did not have to ask. He knew what day it was, what the papers she held meant. He pulled her to her feet and into his arms, holding her tight while she laughed and cried at the same time. "Marry me," he said into her hair. "Today, tomorrow, whenever you are ready, but marry me, Theresa. Let me spend the rest of my life loving you the way you deserve." "Yes," she said without hesitation. "Yes, absolutely yes." They were married on a sunny December afternoon in the small church in Sloan, with the entire ranch crew in attendance along with half the town. Ruby Morrison, who had sent Theresa to the Broken Spoke in the first place, served as her matron of honor, and Samuel stood up with Yates. Josiah Kendrick, still recovering his strength but determined to be there, gave Theresa away, tears in his faded eyes. Theresa wore a simple dress of cream-colored wool that Ruby had helped her make, and she carried a bouquet of dried wildflowers. Yates wore his best suit, his dark hair carefully combed, and when he looked at her walking down the aisle, his eyes held such love that she felt it like a physical warmth spreading through her chest. The ceremony was brief and heartfelt. When the preacher asked if anyone objected to the union, Theresa's breath caught, half expecting Marcus to somehow appear in the doorway like a vengeful ghost. But there was only supportive silence, and then Yates was sliding a simple gold band onto her finger and kissing her while the congregation applauded. The celebration afterward at the ranch was raucous and joyful. Someone produced a fiddle, and there was dancing and food and genuine happiness. Theresa stood with Yates's arm around her waist, watching the people who had become her community, her family, celebrating her happiness, and felt a profound sense of belonging she had never experienced before. "What are you thinking?" Yates asked, his lips close to her ear. "I am thinking that I cannot believe this is my life now, that I am this happy, this safe, this loved." "Get used to it, Mrs. Kendrick. This is just the beginning." They spent their wedding night in the main ranch house, in the suite of rooms that would now be theirs. Josiah had moved to a smaller bedroom on the ground floor, insisting that the younger couple should have the larger space. As Yates carried her over the threshold, Theresa could not help but contrast this moment with her wedding night with Marcus, which had been cold and perfunctory, and marked by his impatience and her fear. This was different in every way. Yates was gentle and patient, and when they made love for the first time, it was a revelation. She had not known it could be like this, tender and passionate and mutual, an act of connection rather than possession. Afterward, lying in his arms in the darkness, she cried again, mourning a little for the years she had lost but mostly grateful beyond words for the life she had found. "Are you all right?" Yates asked, concerned. More than all right. I am happy. I am just overwhelmed by how different everything is now. He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. I am going to spend every day making sure you know you are loved and valued and safe. That is my promise to you. I promise the same to you, she said. I know I have not said this enough, but you saved me, Yates. In every way a person can be saved. We saved each other, he corrected gently. You gave my life purpose and joy I did not even know I was missing. We are building this future together. The winter passed in a cocoon of happiness. Theresa continued managing the cookhouse, though now as the rancher's wife rather than just the hired cook. The distinction mattered to the crew not at all. They still appreciated her meals and her efficient management, and she loved the work too much to give it up. In the spring, she discovered she was pregnant. The news filled her with equal parts joy and terror. She had always wanted children, but Marcus had never permitted it, saying a child would interfere with her duties to him. Now, carrying Yates's baby, she was simultaneously thrilled and anxious about what kind of mother she would be after so many years of having her spirit crushed. Yates was ecstatic, his joy so pure and unfiltered that it helped ease her fears. He began planning immediately, talking about expanding the ranch house to add a nursery, discussing how they would manage the work once the baby came, dreaming aloud about teaching their child to ride and showing them the desert they both loved. What if I am not good at this? Theresa asked one night as they lay in bed, his hand resting on her still flat stomach. What if I do not know how to be a good mother? You will be a wonderful mother, Yates said with absolute certainty. You are kind and patient and strong. You have survived things that would have broken most people and come out the other side with your capacity for love intact. Our child is going to be so fortunate to have you. His confidence buoyed her, and as the pregnancy progressed through the summer, she found herself growing excited rather than just anxious. She read everything she could find about pregnancy and childbirth, consulted with the ranch doctor and the midwife in town, prepared the nursery with care and love. The baby came in late October of 1883, after a long labor that left Theresa exhausted but triumphant. Their son had Yates's blue-green eyes and a thick shock of dark hair, and when the midwife placed him in Theresa's arms, she felt a surge of fierce, protective love so strong it took her breath away. "He is perfect," Yates whispered, sitting beside her on the bed, his arm around her shoulders as they both stared in wonder at this tiny person they had created. "You are perfect. I love you both so much." They named him Daniel after Theresa's father. Young Daniel proved to be a calm baby, watchful and alert, and Theresa discovered that motherhood suited her far better than she had feared. She had help from the ranch women and from Ruby, who came out from town regularly to visit, and Yates was a devoted father, always ready to walk a fussy baby at night or change a diaper without complaint. The months after Daniel's birth were some of the happiest of Theresa's life. Watching Yates with their son, seeing the gentleness and love he showed, erased any lingering doubts about the difference between him and Marcus. This was what a real man looked like, she realized. Someone who was strong enough to be gentle, confident enough to be vulnerable, secure enough to love without controlling. Daniel was 6 months old when the final ghost of the past appeared. Theresa was in the ranch house with the baby when Samuel came to tell her that a man from Chicago had arrived, asking to speak with her. Her blood went cold. "It is not your ex-husband," Samuel said quickly, seeing her face. "He said his name is George Merritt and he is a lawyer. He says it is important and concerns your former husband." Theresa's hands tightened on Daniel, and she looked at Samuel with wide eyes. "Get Yates. Do not let this man near the house until Yates is here." Samuel nodded and hurried off. Theresa paced the parlor, her mind racing through possibilities. Had Marcus found some way to challenge the divorce? Was he trying to claim some right to her property or money? She had nothing he could want, but that did not mean he would not try. Yates arrived within minutes, and together they went out to meet the lawyer. George Merritt was a gray-haired man with a professional demeanor and sad eyes. He stood in the ranch yard, looking uncomfortable in his city suit amid the dust and horses. "Mrs. Kendrick," he said, nodding to her. "Thank you for seeing me. I know this is unexpected and I apologize for the intrusion." "What does Marcus want?" Theresa asked bluntly. "Mr. Garrett does not want anything. Mr. Garrett is dead." The words hit her like a physical blow. Theresa swayed, and Yates's arm came around her waist immediately, supporting her. "What happened?" "He was killed 3 weeks ago in a gambling dispute. An argument turned violent and he was shot. The police investigated and it was ruled self-defense. I am here because I was the executor of his will, and there are matters that need to be resolved." "What matters?" "I have nothing to do with him anymore." George Merritt pulled out a document from his leather case. "Mr. Garrett changed his will after the divorce was finalized. He left a substantial sum of money to you along with a letter. I have been tasked with delivering both." Theresa stared at him in disbelief. "Why would he leave me money? He hated me for leaving him." "I cannot speak to his motivations. I can only execute his final wishes. The sum is $25,000, a significant fortune. And here is the letter." He held out a sealed envelope, and after a long moment, Theresa took it with shaking hands. The handwriting on the front was Marcus's, that familiar, precise script that used to appear on notes telling her all the things she had done wrong. "I will leave you to read that in privacy," George Merritt said. "The money will be transferred to whatever bank you designate. Here is my card. When you are ready to make arrangements, contact me. Again, I apologize for the intrusion and I offer my condolences." After he left, Theresa stood in the ranch yard, staring at the envelope. Yates gently guided her back into the house and sat her down in the parlor, taking Daniel so she could focus. With trembling fingers, she broke the seal and unfolded the letter. "Theresa, if you are reading this, then I am dead. I do not expect you to mourn me. I do not deserve your tears or your grief. I treated you abominably throughout our marriage, and your decision to leave was not just justified but necessary for your survival. I see that now. After you left, I was angry. Furious, actually. I sent someone to find you because I could not accept that you had escaped my control. But when he reported back that you had found protection and seemed happy, something shifted in me. I looked at my life and saw it clearly for the first time. I saw what I had become. A bully. A tyrant. A man who confused control with love and possession with devotion. I am not asking for forgiveness. I do not expect it and I do not deserve it. But I want you to know that I am sorry. I am sorry for every cruel word, every raised hand, every moment I made you feel small or worthless or afraid. You deserved so much better than what I gave you. I changed my will because I want you to have the financial security to build whatever life you choose. Take the money and use it well. Be happy. Find the love and peace that I could never give you. That is the only amends I can offer, and I know it is inadequate. I hope you have found the future you were looking for when you fled Chicago. I hope you have found someone who treats you the way I should have. I hope you are free in every way that matters." Marcus. Theresa read the letter twice, tears streaming down her face. Yates sat beside her, waiting patiently until she finally lowered the paper. "He is dead," she said, her voice hollow. "Marcus is dead and he apologized. Do you believe it? The apology, I do not know, maybe. Does it matter? He is gone and I am free, truly, completely free. He cannot come after me, cannot try to reclaim me, cannot hurt anyone else. It is over." Yates pulled her into his arms and she cried against his chest. Not for Marcus, not really, but for the girl she had been when she married him, for the years she had lost, for the relief of finally, irrevocably, closing that chapter of her life. "What do you want to do about the money?" Yates asked after a while. "I do not want it," Theresa said immediately. "It feels tainted somehow. Like accepting it means forgiving him, and I am not ready to do that." "That is valid. But think about it before you make a final decision. $25,000 could do a lot of good. You could donate it to causes that help other women in situations like yours. You could invest it in the ranch or save it for Daniel's future. The money itself is not tainted. It is just money, and what matters is what you choose to do with it." Over the following weeks, Theresa thought carefully about what to do. Eventually, she decided to keep $10,000 for Daniel's education and future, invest another $10,000 in expanding the ranch, and donate the remaining $5,000 to a women's shelter in Carson City that helped women escape abusive situations. It felt right, like she was taking something terrible and transforming it into something good. The years that followed were full and rich. Daniel grew into a bright, curious boy who loved the ranch and the wide, open spaces of Nevada. He learned to ride almost as soon as he could walk, following his father around with devoted hero worship. In 1885, Theresa gave birth to their daughter, Lillian, a cheerful baby with red hair that came from neither parent but apparently from Yates's grandmother. In 1887, another son, Thomas, joined the family, completing what felt like their perfect little unit. The ranch prospered under Yates's management and Theresa's increasingly important role in the business side of operations. She had a head for numbers and organization that complemented his practical skills with cattle and land. They became true partners in every sense of the word, building a successful operation that became one of the most respected in the region. Josiah Kendrick passed away peacefully in his sleep in the winter of 1889, content in the knowledge that his son was happy and his grandchildren would carry on the family legacy. His funeral was attended by people from all over the territory who had respected him as a fair and honest man. Theresa stood beside Yates as he mourned, remembering how Josiah had welcomed her without judgment when she was still a fugitive from her past, and grateful she had known him. As the 1880s gave way to the 1890s, Theresa sometimes reflected on the journey that had brought her to Nevada. She thought about the terrified woman who had fled Chicago with nothing but a carpetbag and hope, and marveled at how far she had come. She had built a life she loved, married a man who treated her as an equal partner, raised children in an atmosphere of love and security. The scars from her marriage to Marcus faded over time, though they never completely disappeared. There were still moments when raised voices made her tense, when conflict made her want to flee rather than engage. But Yates understood, and their children grew up knowing that their mother had survived something difficult before finding her way home to Nevada and to them. On a warm evening in May of 1895, Theresa sat on the porch of the ranch house watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and purple. Yates sat beside her, his hand clasped in hers, while their 3 children played in the yard. Daniel, now nearly 12, was teaching 9-year-old Lillian how to throw a rope. 7-year-old Thomas was constructing an elaborate fort out of hay bales, narrating an epic battle between cowboys and outlaws to himself. "What are you thinking about?" Yates asked, squeezing her hand gently. "How strange life is. 13 years ago, I was running for my life with no idea what I would find, and now I am here with you, with them, with all of this." She gestured at the ranch spread out before them, the land they had built into something prosperous and enduring. I am thinking how lucky I am. Luck had very little to do with it. You were brave enough to leave, brave enough to keep going when you could have given up, brave enough to trust again when you had every reason not to. That was not luck. That was courage. We were both lucky that Ruby Morrison sent me to the Broken Spoke instead of somewhere else. Yates smiled. I will grant you that. Remind me to thank Ruby again the next time we see her. She said you looked at me like I was the sunrise after a long night. Did you know that? Samuel told me that after you and I had already fallen in love, but before we admitted it to each other. Samuel was a wise man. And yes, that is exactly how I felt, like I had been in darkness and you brought light with you. He raised her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles gently. How I still feel, every single day. Theresa leaned her head on his shoulder, watching her children play as the sun sank lower. She thought about that young woman on the stagecoach, bruised and afraid but determined, and wished she could go back and tell her that everything would be all right. That the escape she was attempting would lead not just to safety, but to genuine happiness. That the cowboy who offered her a job would offer her so much more: a home, a future, a love worth every risk she had taken. She came to escape her past. The cowboy gave her a future worth living for. And in that future, she found not just survival but joy, not just freedom but fulfillment, not just safety but the kind of deep, abiding love that healed wounds she had thought would never close. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Yates called the children inside for supper. They tumbled into the house, full of energy and laughter, and Theresa followed, pausing for just a moment at the threshold to look back at the desert she had crossed so long ago. She silently thanked the scared woman she had been for being brave enough to flee, strong enough to survive, and wise enough to recognize love when it finally appeared in her life. Then she turned and went inside, closing the door on the past and stepping fully into the beautiful present she had built, one day and one choice at a time. The future stretched ahead, bright with promise, and she walked into it hand in hand with the man who had shown her that love was not supposed to hurt, that being cherished was not the same as being controlled, and that sometimes the person you are running toward is far more important than whatever you are running from. In the ranch house kitchen, surrounded by her family, Theresa served supper while Daniel recounted his plans for the next day's riding practice, and Lillian chattered about the wildflowers she wanted to pick in the morning. Thomas, yawning already despite the early hour, leaned against his father's side while trying valiantly to stay awake through the meal. Yates caught Theresa's eye across the table and smiled, and in that smile she saw everything that mattered: past sorrows acknowledged but not dwelt upon, present joys fully embraced, future dreams ready to unfold. After the children were in bed, Yates and Theresa returned to the porch, as was their habit on mild evenings. The desert air had cooled to perfect temperature, and the moon was rising over the mountains, full and bright. "I was thinking," Yates said, settling into the chair beside hers, "that next year, after the spring cattle drive, we should take the whole family up to Lake Tahoe for a week. The children are old enough now to appreciate it, and you have been wanting to see it for years." "That sounds wonderful." Daniel would love the fishing, and Lillian would probably spend the entire time collecting rocks and pine cones. And Thomas would somehow find a way to turn the whole lake into an imaginary battlefield. They laughed together, the easy laughter of people who knew each other deeply and loved what they knew. Theresa reached over and took Yates's hand, threading her fingers through his. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what?" "For giving me everything I did not even know I could hope for. For being patient when I was afraid. For protecting me when I needed protection. for loving me in a way that healed instead of hurt, for our children, for this life, for all of it. Yates brought her hand to his lips again, his eyes serious in the moonlight. You do not have to thank me for loving you. Loving you is the easiest thing I have ever done. Building this life with you, watching you bloom into the strong, confident woman you were always meant to be, that has been the greatest privilege of my life. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the night sounds of the desert, the distant call of coyotes and the closer rustle of wind through the sagebrush. The ranch was quiet, settled for the night, and inside the house their children slept safely. Do you ever wonder what your life would have been like if I had not gotten on that stagecoach to Nevada? Theresa asked. Sometimes, but not with any real regret. I had a good life before you came. The ranch was doing well, I had work I loved and people I respected. But it was not a complete life. I did not even realize what was missing until you walked into the ranch yard looking for a job. He paused, considering his words. I think maybe we were both waiting for each other without knowing it. You needed a place to run to, and I needed someone to build something meaningful with. The timing was not coincidence. It was fate. I did not believe in fate before. Marcus made me cynical about grand romantic notions. And now I think maybe you are right. Maybe some things are meant to be, and the universe conspires to put people in each other's paths at exactly the right moment. She squeezed his hand. I know I was meant to find you. I know I was meant to build this life here in this place with you. Everything I went through before, as terrible as it was, led me here. And I would not change that, because changing it would mean not having this. They eventually went inside and up to their bedroom, where Yates helped Theresa unlace her dress as he did every night, his fingers gentle and familiar. They made love slowly, tenderly, 13 years of marriage having taught them exactly how to please each other. Afterward, Theresa lay with her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat, and felt utterly content. The years continued to pass in a steady rhythm of seasons and growth. Daniel grew into a young man who shared his father's skill with horses and his mother's head for business. He took over more responsibility on the ranch, proving himself capable and level-headed. Lillian developed a passion for teaching and eventually opened a small school in Sloan, bringing education to ranch children who would otherwise have had to travel far for learning. Thomas, the most adventurous of the three, spent several years exploring the West before returning home to help run the ranch alongside his brother. All three children grew up knowing their mother's story, understanding that she had escaped a dangerous situation and built a new life through courage and determination. Theresa never sugar-coated the reality of what she had experienced, believing it was important for her children, especially her daughter, to understand that women had the right to leave situations that harmed them and to demand better for themselves. Your father showed me what real love looks like, she told Lillian when her daughter was preparing for her own wedding in 1905. It is not possessive or controlling. It does not tear down or diminish. Real love builds you up. It makes you more yourself, not less. If you ever find yourself in a relationship where you feel afraid or small or trapped, you leave. Do you understand me? You leave and you come home and we will help you build a new life. That is what I did and it saved me. Lillian hugged her mother tightly. I understand, Mama. And I promise, if I ever need to, I will be as brave as you were. As Theresa moved into her 50s and then her 60s, she remained active in ranch management and became increasingly involved in territorial and then state politics, once Nevada gained statehood in 1864. She used her voice and her resources to advocate for women's rights, for protections against domestic violence, for educational opportunities for ranch children. She corresponded with other women throughout the West who were working towards similar goals, building networks of support and advocacy. Yates supported her fully in all of these endeavors, never once suggesting that her place was at home tending to domestic matters. He was proud of what she accomplished and happy to share the spotlight as she became increasingly known throughout Nevada as a woman of influence and compassion. On their 25th wedding anniversary in December of 1908, the ranch hosted a massive celebration. Friends came from all over the territory, and the party lasted late into the night. Theresa wore a beautiful dress of deep blue velvet, and Yates looked distinguished with silver beginning to thread through his dark hair. They danced together while their children and grandchildren. Daniel had married and had 2 children, and Lillian's first baby was due in the spring. Looked on with affection. 25 years, Theresa marveled as they swayed to the music. A quarter of a century. Best 25 years of my life, Yates said, pulling her closer. Here is to 25 more. At least, she agreed, resting her head on his shoulder. As they aged, they settled into a comfortable routine. They handed over more of the ranch operations to Daniel and Thomas. Though they never fully retired, both too invested in the land and the work to step away completely. They traveled when they could, finally making it to Lake Tahoe and San Francisco, and once, memorably, all the way to Boston so Theresa could see her childhood home one more time. They sat on the porch every evening, weather permitting, holding hands and watching the sun set over the mountains they both loved. They had become fixtures in Sloan, the respected elder couple that everyone knew and many came to for advice or support. The ranch continued to prosper under the next generation's management, and they had the satisfaction of knowing their life's work would continue long after they were gone. In the spring of 1920, Yates fell ill with pneumonia. Despite the doctor's best efforts and Theresa's devoted nursing, he did not recover. He died peacefully in their bed with Theresa holding his hand and their children gathered around, and his last words were, "Love you. Always have. Always will." Theresa was devastated by his loss, but she did not crumble. She had learned long ago that she was strong enough to survive anything, and she honored Yates's memory by continuing to live fully and actively. She remained involved in the ranch, doted on her growing number of grandchildren and great-grandchildren, and continued her advocacy work for women's rights until her own health began to fail. She passed away peacefully in her sleep in the summer of 1925, at the age of 68. She was buried next to Yates on a hill overlooking the ranch, with a view of the desert and mountains that had become her home. The funeral was attended by hundreds of people whose lives she had touched through her kindness, her courage, and her unwavering belief that everyone deserved dignity and the chance for a better life. Her children and grandchildren remembered her not as a victim who had escaped abuse, though that was part of her story, but as a woman who had built a remarkable life out of courage and determination. They told stories of her strength, her humor, her fierce love for family, and her passionate advocacy for justice. They remembered how she and Yates had loved each other with a devotion that served as a model for what partnership should look like. Years later, when Lillian's granddaughter asked about her great-great-grandmother, Lillian told her the story. She came to Nevada running from a terrible situation, with nothing but hope and determination. She found work on a ranch, fell in love with a good man, and built a life of purpose and joy. She showed all of us that it is never too late to start over, that courage can change everything, and that real love heals rather than harms. She was extraordinary, and everything we have now exists because she was brave enough to get on that stagecoach and travel into the unknown. The Broken Spoke Ranch continued to thrive for generations, a testament to the foundation Theresa and Yates had built together. And somewhere in the ranch house, carefully preserved, was the letter Marcus had written, a reminder of where Theresa had come from and how far she had traveled, not just in miles but in every way that mattered. She came to escape her past. The cowboy gave her a future worth living for. And in doing so, they created a legacy of love, resilience, and hope that echoed through time, touching lives far beyond their own and proving that sometimes the most extraordinary journeys begin with a single step into the unknown, taken on faith that somewhere out there, something better is waiting to be found.